Hello from Cellar Studio. I thought I would do a video since we can't meet for our regular classes. I would like to show you guys today how to do a palette knife painting. Several of you on my Facebook and Instagram have asked me to show you how to do those. So today I'm going to do a quick demo. You'll learn the paints to use and you'll be able to do your own at home. And then eventually we'll get back together again. So Mike is just going to pan around the room. You'll see some paintings you've seen begun. You'll see some that are finished. And then we'll get going. Okay, first let me show you the paints, the colors that I will be using today. Cerulean blue for the sky, maybe a touch of indigo in there. Titanium white, of course. I'm going to be using a magenta or alizarin crimson. You can interchange them. Yellow, cadmium yellow light. Sap green. Maybe a little Payne's gray. So those are the colors. And I have my knives at the ready because I like to keep a separate knife for each color. That way I can go back and forth. The other thing I like to do, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, I go back through the photographs that I've taken. I like to kind of get a start. I took this in Bethlehem last week. It's got these beautiful cherry blossoms in it. It has this luscious green. I do not want the workmen or the road or any of that, or even the city center. So I can eliminate all that, which is artistic license, and you can do that too. We are going to start with a stretched canvas, just a regular old stretched canvas. I like to put a coating of acrylic Venetian red. As my students know, I like to start with that, but you don't have to. So we'll get right down to it now. I'm going to start with the beautiful pinks of these cherry blossoms. So I'm mixing my magenta or crimson with the white, and I'm probably going to put them around here. I'm going to vary the intensity of the color. Right now it looks bad on top of this Venetian red, but that will get better as time goes on. I say hopefully. So I'm trying to work fast because I know you don't want to be watching this all day long. And as everybody knows, value is the most important thing in a painting, which is the lightness and the darkness. Without the darkness, we have no light. So under here, if you notice, these cherry blossoms have some dark stuff going on. They're creating shadows on the ground. So I'm taking the green and a little bit of indigo and or Payne's gray, and I'm working that into the bottom of this beautiful pink stuff. And generally, working with the knife, I like to work with the underside of the knife. Now, I'm graduating down to some of this shadow. I don't want it to be so literal that it looks like I'm copying a photograph. This is strictly reference. So now I'm heading down into this beautiful green. It's like a spring limey green. So I'm just going to start to put some of that on there. Keeping it fairly flat. I'm not using an impasto method at this point. I'm keeping the paint somewhat flat. Again, I'm varying. some light, some dark, just the way it looks when light hits grass. I'm going to come back into here, a little more shadow. I don't want it too blue, so I'm going to put a little bit of my magenta into that. And here's the fun part. This is where, when they start to get together, it really creates surprising effects, because you're uncovering what's underneath and you're also laying on top your color. Now at this point, I think I'm going to go up into the sky and start to put in some of this. Although wait, before I do that, I'm going to make sure I get enough up here so that when I come down with my blue, I can blend it. You can already see how beautiful this gets with the white and the pink blending together. Okay, the blue, I've got mostly white, a little cerulean in there, maybe a dab of indigo, not too much. I like to keep that sky light. This actually would be considered an abstract painting, even though it's based on a realistic scene. And you don't have to cover every square inch, which for me, that's why, one of the reasons I like the Venetian red acrylic underneath. The areas that you might not cover with paint, you have that lovely red showing through. Okay, now we're getting to the fun part in the sky, where the sky starts to meet the blossoms. So I'm going to take the blossoms and I'm going to start to just scooch them up a little bit into the sky. And you can see I'm already getting a beautiful lavender shade that's just being created by the red and the blue. And you remember from school, red and blue makes purple. So that's what's happening up in here. So we're getting this lovely shade. And it varies, because as you go along, some areas are lighter and some are darker. Throwing a little bit more of that red in there just because I like it. And you can do whatever you like. That's another thing that's so much fun about doing this. And again, I'm still keeping it fairly. Now I'm going down into here. I'm going to do the same thing down here. I don't want too much of that dark stuff to creep up, so I've got to be ready to go back in with the pink if I want. And I might even throw some pink down here just to unite the whole painting. Because it's an abstract, you can do whatever you want. And it's still fun. Okay, now I'm down here. I like the little patches of sunlight that are popping in and out up in here. Little dappled light. So I'm putting those in. It's nice because when you want to clean your knife off, you just pull it down and throw it into the foreground. This area here gives your eye a chance to rest a little bit after all the tedium of this stuff. I like to keep this flat, again, flat, flat. Scrape, scrape, reapply. Put some darker green down here. And I want to start to, I'm noticing this is very horizontal. So I'm going to start to put some verticality into it, just so that it doesn't get too boring. And maybe I'll just try to put some of this red down here, see what happens. And when you're doing this, it's critical. I like to work flat on here. It's very hard on the easel to do this. But you have to be careful because it gets all over your pants. Okay, do a little bit more of this green. And I'm wanting to see a little sky down in this, so I'm bringing the cerulean. Maybe a little bit of this. And there's no law against using your brush if you decide you want. And on mine, I'll often use the brush if I want to suggest tree trunks, because these are still trees, even though they look like just blobs of pink. They are trees. So I may want to put in some trunks. And I'm just looking for a brush that is, let's see here, this one looks good. Still, only using those colors. You can just suggest. I'm a little shaky because I had coffee. And if you get a line in there that you don't like, that's okay, because then you just put more of this pink across it. Now they're starting to look more like trees, but yet they're like no trees you've ever seen, because they're abstract trees. And I like, see what happened there? That pink went right down into the foreground. A lovely happy accident. Trying to make the ones on the end lean in to bring the eye in. Now this is practically done, believe it or not. And what I like to do toward the end is take the knife and just scrape it along and see what happens, because sometimes it's surprising. And you get effects you can't get with a brush. See how that paint goes up into that sky? And down in here, same thing. And you'll end up, you have to have a lot of paper towels. And as my students know, I love Aviva. I have a Viva towel to scrape my brush or my knife. But for this kind of stuff, I use the Inferior Bounty. And I just wipe it like that to get the excess off. But look at these colors that are created just by scraping the knife ever so lightly. And at this point, you're just using your eyeballs and you're thinking, I think I might want to put something darker here. Because it's all about the dark and the light. Okay. My cameraman is telling me we need to cut this short. So, there it is. You can come back after this is dry and you can add to it if you want to. There it is.